sky's not blue.
You need to understand that when the time comes, I'm going to be taking over.
Welcome back to the Cult House Podcast. I'm your host, the Scholar of Spite and the Saturday Night Delight, Roger Riddell. Joining me today, he is a staple of the Brooklyn music scene who has performed with bands including A Pale Horse Named Death and Seventh Void. His current project is the industrial group Autopsy Club, where every night can be open mic night if you want it to be.
That's right.
He is Matt Brown.
Hey, how you doing? Hey, thanks for having me on. That's cool. Yeah. Open mic night. Bring your own body.
Yeah, it was funny because when I was doing the initial kind of research for this, I just Googled Autopsy Club, and the open mic night reference is like one of the first things that comes up, and I'm like, oh, that's like a really good like dark joke.
Yeah, I love it too. It's just, and the cool thing is that at least it's one of the only things that kind of shows up. You can have a band name that everything under the sun shows up. At least that's just like one thing. So I know we'll be hearing that forever and ever, but it never gets old for me. I think it's pretty funny.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of matches with that sort of dark, dry sense of humor that the Brooklyn metal scene has always kind of seemed to have too.
Yeah, especially with the typos and all those guys. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I guess Industrial's always kind of had that sort of sense of humor to it as well.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, there's the darkness.
Yeah, you froze there for a second.
Yeah, I'm sure. I hope I don't have to restart this thing.
But yeah, tell me a little bit about I'm a little bit familiar with the Brooklyn music scene, just from being a fan of a lot of those bands over the years. But tell me a little bit of your story and how you got involved in that and how you've kind of found yourself in a lot of these different circles. Because I know that you've been, within like the Typo Negative circle and the Life of Agony circle. And I think you've even been involved with like Lou Reed and Joan Jett before.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's weird, growing up, I had a lot of friends in high school, junior high school, and they were all a part of the Brooklyn scene. I didn't really know much about the hardcore scene or what was happening in Brooklyn or the city and stuff. I was kind of into a lot of new wave industrial or 80s stuff, and then of course classic rock when I was growing up, because my parents and my family were always into classics. And then the grunge scene hit, and the grunge scene was kind of like a mishmash, so to speak. Like there was industrial in there was electronic, there was rock, and there was all kinds of stuff. And so I was really into the alternative scene. And all my friends in high school, junior high school, they were more in touch with what was going on in Brooklyn. And they had their own bands, and they were playing punk and playing hardcore. And we made, I made friends and they would drag me to Lemoore, and I would just, learn about all this stuff that I wasn't really into, but because of my friends, I got into it. And we had our own bands, and it's such a small clique. You just start meeting everybody, and before you know it, you're standing, you're hanging out with Kenny Hickey, or because we were all rehearsing in the same studios and stuff, Fast Lane Studios, Ace London Studios. A lot of these bands like Biohazard, Typo, we're all hanging out. Anyway, I was really into electronic music, and I was really into alternative music and rock and stuff. And at one studio, Fastlane, there was a band that was starting up, and it was electronic and rock, and they needed a guitar player. And actually, one of my friends was the guitar player, and he left the band, and they were looking for another guy, and my name came up, and I auditioned for this band, and it was called Uranium 235. And that was kind of like the beginning for me getting into something a little more serious, where we started touring and opening up for bigger bands, Typo being one of them, Life of Agony, and a whole bunch of others. And that's where I became friends with all those guys, really, through playing on the road and showing up late to all these venues in a van that was breaking down and stuff like that. And yeah, I mean, but yeah, it was like, and I was always really into the technical stuff. I got into computers and recording and all those things at an early age, or before, or just as it was coming out and people started to use it in productions and stuff. Like I was kind of like, had my finger on the pulse of all of that. And so I was helping other guys in other bands with their productions. And that's also how I became tighter with a lot of people too, just through working with them in that way. But, like Sal Abriscato, for instance, he got me involved with stagehand work, and I met a lot of people through that. And it's just like you're working alongside a lot of people, and they take notice, and all of a sudden your name comes up, and now I'm working for Lou Reed. That's kind of how this whole thing happened for me. It just one thing leads to another. AC Slade, love him. We kind of came up in the same sort of scene in the city, playing the same places. He had his bands that were electronic and rocky and punky, and kind of along the same circles as Uranium 235, and we became friends back then. And fast forward, like, we have mutual friends, and then all of a sudden they needed somebody to help with Joan Jett and AC's and Joan Jett. It's just how it goes. It's hard to explain. It's just be cool. You never know what is going to happen 10 years from now. Your name pops up.
Yeah, I kind of have always loved how everyone who has these kind of interesting stories of these different sort of circles that they've woven in and out of. It's kind of like we all are just kind of like Forrest Gumping our way through all of these connections, really.
Absolutely. I kind of joke about the same thing. I'm like the Forrest Gump of rock and roll. Sometimes I don't even know the history of someone I've met. Maybe I'm in the same room with this mega superstar, and I'm kind of like dumb in that way. I don't know who everyone is, and it kind of helps me out because I'm not nervous, and I just can be normal. And all of a sudden, like, I find myself working with somebody, and it's like Forrest Gumping my way through it the whole time.
Yeah, and has it been weird seeing the way that Brooklyn's kind of evolved over the last couple decades? Because like for the last like 9 years, I've lived in DC, and like I think of a lot of cities in the context of the music scenes that they tend to be known for. And it's like I walk around DC and I'm just kind of thinking, this isn't the same city that produced that hardcore scene in like the 80s,
Absolutely. I feel the same way about Brooklyn, about New York City. I think about a lot of places, but I've seen it change around me. Nothing I remember is there anymore. And I got to admit, like, I'm not very good at going out and searching for the new stuff, because I know there's a new thing. I just don't know what it is, because I think as I got older, I just had to go to work, and I've got my head down, just working. And I guess I don't have the time, or I just don't pay attention like I used to, but everything I knew is gone. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, even when I've gone to like New York City before, it's kind of like walking around some of the neighborhoods is just like, I don't know if this is the same city where a place like CBGB's could have thrived,
Yeah. That block is completely different.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, Coney Island High, just on St. Mark Street. That was one place we used to play a lot. That's gone. Continental, cool bar. Everyone used to play, gone. Um, I can go on and on. They're all gone. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I love how in a city like that though, I think of like that city, Chicago, Los Angeles, where you can have like multiple different styles of music thriving at the same time though, when things are really like hitting it off, where in New York at one point you could have like walked down the street to like several different clubs in one night and probably seen like White Zombie in one place and like Carnivore, Typo Negative, someone like that in another place, and Cro-Mags in another place. And that's always been kind of interesting to me, that you can have that much of a um, music that's in the same vein, but like also just so stylistically different, both in terms of the overall sound and the presentation.
Yeah. I feel like we had a lot of extremes.
Yeah.
Extremely goth, extremely hardcore. You could see it all.
Yeah. Was there like a lot of that did it mesh together well when if those bands kind of ended up in the same places on the same bills?
I feel like there was always some underlying punk element to all of that, like an attitude that worked together, even if the bands were completely different. I felt like the New York City scene had an attitude, and I think that was the common thread.
Yeah. Yeah. And so Autopsy Club just put out its first single, The Oracle. Um and I've listened to it several times, and it reminds me a lot of like kind of that 90s industrial style of music that um one of the first things I thought of was like, this is something that I could have pictured being on like the Mortal Kombat soundtrack back in like 96,
Yeah.
It really kind of like took me back to like that whole period in music.
Yeah. I was always into electronic music and rock, and being a guitar player, trying to find a way to put the two together. And there was that clip in the 90s where a lot of bands were doing that, and I became very influenced by that. And even Uranium, we were sort of like doing that type of thing. And yeah, it's just a sound I think comes naturally for me and Abel, and we kind of missed it. And we're just doing what we do. It's coming out that way, and it's fun, and that's really what what matters at this point. It has to be fun for us, and feel good. Yeah.
Yeah, I've really been into the whole like resurgence of industrial that's happened over the last few years too. Like I don't know if you've heard Three Teeth, but they've kind of been like the main band kind of driving that. And I've been like just kind of looking at that in the context of like the time periods when industrial has thrived, and it's always kind of like the early to mid 90s were kind of like socially and politically ambiguous, and it kind of feels like we're in that same kind of space now.
Yeah, I don't really have a lot to say about politics and like what's going on in the world so much. It's like I'm just not that guy. It just
Yeah.
so I you know lyrically speaking or content wise, it's more of like there's attitude in there, and there's it's more about the sound and how things are floating along and stuff, and less about. Yeah, I agree with, because there wasn't a lot of statements made at that time. Although there were some industrial bands that were definitely way more political, but I just never really dive into that in my own creations. It's just I'm not one to speak on those subjects so much.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's always kind of it's a bit of a minefield at times.
Yeah, I think we've been personally, like, I've been bombarded with so much of it over the last 3, 4, or 5 years that I just I can't anymore. I have to escape, and music for me is an escape. So I got to go in a different direction.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it gets exhausting at a point because like I'll be talking to like family sometimes. They're just like, "Did you see this thing in the news?" I'm like, "No." I like work in the news during the day. I don't want to engage with it outside of work.
Yeah. I don't want to lose friends. I
Yeah.
love my friends, I don't want to have like this crazy disagreement over something. I want to keep my friends. Whatever they believe in, I'm fine with that. It's just like I love my friends. I want to have friends.
Yeah, and um how did Autopsy Club come about?
So Abel, he a long time ago in the 90s, I was on Instant Messenger, uh AIM, whatever, and I was in Uranium, and this guy started writing to me. He found me, asking me questions about production, about recording, about sounds and synthesis and all that. And it was Abel. And he was learning how to do it for himself. And he would send me these tracks one after another, little bits and pieces, maybe a part, maybe a full song. And they were just getting better and better and better. And, this is 1998, I want to say 1998, around there, 7, 8. And we just stayed in touch, and we were friends this whole time, and he just keep on sending me stuff. And he's just become such a powerhouse with ideas. He just sends me amazing ideas, and sometimes they're really out there. Like, I kind of have to rein it in sometimes for it to make sense for me. But he's just, he's an amazing dude. And anyway, so like, yeah, I was in these other bands and stuff, and Pale Horse Named Death, Seventh Void, and it always took so much time between going to work, making money, paying the bills, and spending time on those bands, going on the road. Me and Scott, Abel, he goes by, we never really had the time to put this together and do it for real. But, life changed. I got out of these other groups and stuff. I had to go to work. I wanted some things in life, like I wanted to buy a house. I wanted to have a little savings and all those things. And being in those bands, it took me away, and I just wasn't able to save or do some life things. So I got out of those bands, and I did some life things, and then all of a sudden pandemic hits, all those things. And it just felt like the right time. It was just like, hey, you want to, make a few songs, put them out there. We don't have to make a record. We don't have to get a record deal. We don't have to do any of that. We just do the best we can, have fun, and put it out song by song. And hopefully it'll find an audience and they'll like it. And we could just keep doing that. And that's kind of like it in a nutshell, like in the cliff notes of it, I guess. Yeah, we're just like having fun, making music together. And at the same time, it's like, if we're going to do it, might as well like push it a little bit and try to reach people and see what happens. That's all.
Yeah, yeah, that's one of my favorite things about like the modern sort of music distribution environment is that you can be like pretty much anyone now and figure out a platform to get whatever you want to create in front of people. And it's like instantly at that point, if they like it, they like it and they can support it. And if not, otherwise, like you don't have to have that middleman so much anymore. Unless you're like really trying to, and you could still make that kind of deal with the devil to get that marketing arm behind it, but you don't necessarily have to have it anymore, you know?
Yeah. You could do a lot by yourself these days. The thing I always say is that, but then you're doing it by yourself, right? Everything takes time and energy to do. So you have to weigh out if it's worth you doing it or if it's worth giving somebody a little bit for them to do it so that you don't have to. So, that's what it comes down to. It's like back in the day, like record companies would develop bands and they would put time and energy into bands. I don't think, I don't see it anyway. Like I could be completely wrong, but I don't think that's happening anymore as like it was back in the 90s. I still think having a record deal though, like if you have someone that believes in you, could be beneficial. You have to give away something to get something. So you might give away some rights to your publishing or to, stuff like that, in order to get publicity or maybe a budget for some things like a video or something. So it's really a give and take thing. I'm just at the point in my life where I've kind of been through that already. And I didn't really have much success. I mean, it depends on how you measure it. I feel like I did a lot of cool things in life and I feel proud of that, but I was never really like a household name or anything,
Yeah.
The projects that I was a part of never really became ultra popular. But nonetheless, I'm happy. And yeah, so I don't know that I would have a record deal right now, because they also want from you too. So you have to show up and you have to sometimes, or a lot of times, sacrifice things in life to go after that goal. And again, I've done that a whole bunch of times, and I'm at the point in life where I think song by song right now, and being happy and not feeling the pressure so much is a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's always good to not have that sort of weight bearing down on you.
Yeah.
So speaking of some of your previous bands, when you joined Seventh Void, that band formed, if I remember correctly, like not too long after Peter Steele passed away, right?
Actually, Pete was still alive.
Okay.
It was around 2003 that I became a part of it. And Johnny and Kenny were writing songs with I'm sorry, I'm drawing blank.
That's okay.
We'll go back on that. But yeah, they were writing songs, and they wanted another guitar player, and I believe Sal Abrascato was talking to Kenny, and he had put my name forward, and I started working with them, and we proceeded to complete writing Heaven Is Gone. Kenny would come over my house, and we would bash away at ideas and make sketches of the songs that were pretty complete productions. And this lasted a while. This lasted maybe 3 years, if I think. We were all working as stagehands and all working in between, paying the bills and stuff. So it took a long time. And then when we finally completed the record, I was so burnt out. I was like, we got to find somebody to mix this thing. I can't anymore. I can't focus on this anymore. And Johnny had brought up Vinnie Paul, because Dime loved demos. I believe the guys went to go see Damage Plan when they came through the city, and they were playing the demos that we were making in my house. They were playing, blasting them on the bus, and Dime was really all over. He loved it, and of course, we know what happened to Dime, and it's horrible. And so, like, fast forward a little bit after that, Vinny was like, Dime really liked this. I want to put this out on the label. And we had Vinny and his engineer Sterling mix it, and then it came out there. But Pete was alive. We actually did the last Typo Negative tour, Typo 7 Void, before Pete had passed away.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I always have that like time period kind of mixed up because there was like so much that went on. I was a huge Typo Negative fan, and I just remember that time period being when I think Kenny and Johnny were also playing for Danzig, like off and on.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that would have been around the time that like Pete had like gone to Rikers and to the hospital, and there was that hoax on their website for a little bit where they put like the picture of a grave that had like Peter Still free at last. And
I remember when Kenny was playing guitar in Danzig, and at that time we were kind of wrapping up the Heaven Is Gone record. Like, we had all these breaks in between because Kenny would go on tour, do that. I was working with other artists as an engineer, and I would go away on tour doing this, so that we had all these little breaks in between. I remember. And then when we finally did that tour with Typo 7 Void opening, Pete was he had to wear an ankle bracelet, an anklet that had to phone home, because like it was like the parole thing, that it was just such a weird time.
yeah, I was lucky enough to catch them on the tour right before that one, in like spring of 07, and saw them on April Fool's Day in Cincinnati. So Typo Negative and April Fool's Day was a hell of a combination. It's like the chicken dance thing, just kind of trolling the crowd with the applause lights and all of that until the crowd like complied, and then they finally turned off the chicken dance music and played. But it was a good like 25 minutes of chicken dance.
Yeah. I like when Pete would count off the beginning of the set and then say good night and walk off. At the beginning of the set, it's great.
Yeah.
No one's gonna. There's never gonna be another Pete Steele. Never.
Yeah, I mean the thing that always sticks out in my head is on Origin of the Feces at the beginning, like that whole lead in to I Know You're Fucking Someone Else. He has the fake stage banter for the fake live crowd that they have on that album. He's just like $15. You paid 15 American dollars to get in here. So who sucks?
Yeah. I feel like he did that every night. Like he was so witty and off the cuff. I can never be like that. Like he was always someone to look up to because he was just so quick with that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, the Seventh Void record though, Heaven Is Gone. Like I loved that album when it came out, and I don't know how I had the timeline mixed up on that, but I always thought that Kenny's voice was really underrated.
Yeah, Kenny. It's funny. Like these are my heroes, as with I think a lot of people, but like growing up, these were my heroes. And I never realized that Kenny sang as much as he did on those records until like we started working together. And then I recognized his voice, obviously, but Kenny, his range is really good. He can go really high. And he worked at that, over the years. And I think he even got better when he started singing as a front man for Seventh Void. Yeah. He went through a lot of stuff to get there though. He had like nasal passage type surgery and stuff He was irritating him, and he was getting massive headaches. So he went through a lot, but yeah, he's one hell of a singer.
Johnny too, like he's just underrated as a drummer in my opinion.
Yeah, Johnny's just a solid drummer.
Yeah, he's
Yeah,
just like a good meat and potatoes dude.
yeah. He and we always get along. We always got along when we were jamming together. It's just he's easy to read. He's easy to jam with. He just lays it down. Yeah.
Yeah, and speaking of also just Brooklyn music scene staples, so in the Typo Negative videos, they have their I guess their sort of tour manager Slitzy, and it's a name that I've seen kind of appear in liner notes over the years for Brooklyn bands.
Yeah.
um how do you know like how he kind of got intertwined with everyone too?
I mean, I can't tell you the actual story of how it all happened. Jeremy, you're talking about? Yeah.
Yeah, because he's just like he's a character on all those Typo DVDs.
Jeremy is a character. He always was and he always will be. He's a lighting designer, and Jeremy knows how to stir the pot, and he's just pure entertainment. And I think that's part of what it's about, for those guys. They needed the entertainment, and early on I'm sure he provided that in spades, and then he was doing the videography, all that stuff, and he just captures all these crazy moments. And Slitzy, Jeremy, is family. But I couldn't tell you all the details about those things. You would have to ask Johnny or Kenny. I'm sure they have stories that you can write 4 books about. Yeah.
And back to Autopsy Club, as you all are producing more music for that, do you kind of foresee potentially taking that live and maybe doing like some limited kind of tour, like festival stuff?
Yeah, totally. I mean, that could be a fun thing. I actually, like, a lot of people I know, other musicians and stuff, they ask me kind of the same things. And some of these guys are, sort of popular and really good. And I always say to myself, like, that would be really cool to be able to have enough material to go out and play. We actually got offered opening for a band not too long ago, and it's just way too early for that for us. Like, I feel like we just want to release song by song quality and try to get through like 7 or 8 of them before we decide to hit a stage with it, so then we'll have enough to actually perform something, at length, because it would kind of like suck to go out there and just do a song and say, okay, good night, Yeah.
I mean, it's like it's still also kind of, it seems like it's kind of touch and go for touring and things like that at this point still too. Like I know there's been a handful of tours that have been able to successfully kind of pull things off without incident, but there's kind of a little bit more of like an upfront risk now, as far as like with the pandemic still kind of in like its waning stages, entire tours kind of getting sidetracked from one person getting sick, and then you've got all of that like headache to deal with as far as like figuring out the losses from missed shows and being stuck somewhere else being sick.
Yeah. I feel like right now, especially, things are getting a lot better than they were in the last 2 years, for sure. A lot of my friends are going on tour now, and they seem to be having less of an issue. I know I had a lot of friends, and I've seen a lot of tours cancel in the past. I work at a theater, and a lot of the shows that I was scheduled to go and work got canceled over the past 2 years. Now we're back to work. As far as my theater is concerned, I'm back to work. Every now and then, yes, something does fall through and cancel, but it seems like everybody's raring to go. So I'd expect a lot of bands going out there. What I do know is that is so many bands are going out there, so it's oversaturated. Everybody wants to go. So logistics, like getting a bus, getting a van, getting a flight, all those things, I think is a nightmare. But I think that we're definitely way more back than we've been in the last 2 years right now.
Yeah. I mean, I've been really stoked that the bands that have all been, out there hitting it again too, have all been, they had like 2 years to work on new material, and they've pretty like consistently, all of the stuff that I've like checked out in the last, like, especially the last year, has been like some of the best stuff that I've heard in years, because it's like everyone's got that pent up energy and angst and frustration and everything,
Yeah, so here we're in my studio. I built this over the pandemic. This was bare. There was nothing here. These walls, nothing, even this desk, all this stuff. I wish that this was built in the beginning of the pandemic for that reason, because all of these bands, they finally had time to really focus on quality music, making quality music, and having more time to focus on it. When you're going to work and you've got a family, you've got all these things to fix around you or whatever it is, it's just, I wonder how some of these bands, some of these stars come up with great stuff all the time. It's hard to be that prolific or be that creative all the time. So the pandemic was kind of like a mixed blessing. I wish that this was built in the beginning. I would have been writing more music, but I took that time to actually build the place. It took that year. But I agree.
It's always kind of like it's kind of fascinating to me that the bands, even before the pandemic, kind of had the output that they did, because like you said, they've got all of just the personal stuff on top of if they're on like, a record deal and they're in like that sort of album cycle, tour cycle kind of thing, they have that kind of pressure on top of them too, on top of all the stuff they have to take care of when they get home from tour. So it is just kind of fascinating that so many bands over the years have been able to put out consistent like quality with that. And then now we're just kind of like seeing, oh, this is what happens when they have even more time and less pressure to really like put out their best stuff.
Yeah. And the industry the way it is with I'm not going to get on the streaming rant and everything. I think it's a necessity at this point. It's like, but there's not a lot in it for the artists unless they're making money on tour or selling merchandise, or like the music at this point. It's a tool, it's a promotional tool. There's not much being made on the music itself. I mean, you have to stream millions and millions of times to make anything of it these days when it comes to the music. Nobody can get out there and be in front of people to play their music and make guarantee money or make merchandise money during that whole time, so yeah, it's a struggle.
Yeah. I mean, I've talked with other people about this before, but it really kind of seems like now the bands that are successful at a high level basically have to turn themselves into, a lifestyle brand, almost like Kiss did, where they've got like every kind of merch under the sun, and they've got a following that's willing to pay for any kind of merch that has their name on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's a lot of music out there. I find it really hard to keep on top of what's new, and it's like a needle in the haystack sometimes. There's so much content out there, and if everyone has to be Kiss to make something of it, that's pretty tough.
Yeah. I mean, that's a big investment to just to have that catalog of merch on top of your music.
Yeah, and then getting it to the venue, and where are you going to keep that stuff? And a lot of things that I miss about the Brooklyn scene is actually the studios, because those were where everyone met up, and it was kind of like the social gathering of musicians. You could jam for an hour with your group and walk out into the lobby and bump into, you know, the Biohazard guys or the Marauder guys or the Typo guys, or like all the millions of local high school bands that you were friends with, and Brooklyn and Lemoore especially gave you an opportunity. All these local, all of the high school bands, all the kid bands gave them an opportunity to open up for their heroes. A lot of venues these days, they don't do that. I remember one of my friends' bands opening for Deicide, and it was like, oh my God, we're opening for Deicide, and even like my own band, like opening for Typo Negative was like mind blowing for me back then. And you got to give it to the Parentes at Lemoore. Like they really did that for people. And Mike Ferrara over at Fastlane Studios, he would let us stay there all night long. And I just don't know anybody that does that. Yeah.
Yeah. And actually when you were in A Pale Horse Named Death, how did you end up getting linked into that band? Because I know that you mentioned that Sal Abruscato was instrumental in a lot of the gigs that you had lined up back then.
Yeah, I just threw. So like in Uranium days, we were opening for Life of Agony, and we were going cross country. Life of Agony was playing Foundations Forum, this convention, music convention, where all these all of like the big companies would go see the band showcase. And I remember becoming friends with Sal. We were friends before that, but that's really when we started hanging out and stuff. And but Sal kind of like when he got out of Life of Agony, he was looking to do something, and I was jamming with my friend Billy Kelly after I had gotten out of Uranium, and Sal was looking for something to do, and Billy bumped into Sal at a studio, Ace London. That's what I'm saying. Like the studio was the place. And Billy had mentioned to Sal that we were doing something, and Sal wanted to listen to it. And all of a sudden, Sal's playing drums in this group that we had called Supermassive. It was kind of like a post-hardcore type thing. And that was kind of short-lived. Billy had passed away a few years into it, and Sal got back together with Life of Agony. It was like the reunion thing. It's when they released that Irving Plaza live CD.
Yeah.
Around there, 2002, 3, I want to say. And then like that's when the guys in Seventh Void, Kenny, Johnny, they wanted to get, they needed a guitar player, and Sal had recommended me. And it's just, that's how it goes. It's like one thing after another. People mention stuff, and it's kind of incestuous in a way. Like we were kind of like the same guys rolling around in different iterations and different projects and stuff. And then at one point, Sal he had this music that he wanted to create, and it really wasn't supposed to be a band. It was just something that he wanted to put out there. And he had asked me to help him produce and engineer it, and play some guitar on it and work on it. And that was Pale Horse Named Death. And so they okay. He showed me the stuff, the demos, and I was like, yeah, we really got to do this for real. And took those demos and turned it into a record. And it was just me and Sal on And Hell Will Follow Me. Actually, Mina had come and sang some stuff on there, and we got Bobby Hamble to play some solos, and the other solos were me. And but basically it was just like an in-house thing, and it really wasn't supposed to become a band. And Sal kind of leaked it a little bit and put it out there, and it got noticed. And before you knew it, SPV was, there was a record deal and all kinds of stuff. And when could you get the band together? Can you open up for Monster Magnet and then we were scrambling, and we were just trying to figure out, all right, who could we get in the band? And Sal had showed the music to Johnny and Kenny, and Johnny was like, if you need somebody, I'll do it. And then we had Johnny, and now we have 2 drummers from Typo in the same band. And Bobby Hamble played on the first trip with us. And it just all of a sudden it became a band, and it really wasn't supposed to be. And it was like I wasn't expecting to be the engineer, producer, guitar player, touring guitar player, and then doing the rest of it and going on tour and all that stuff. It's like, touring's fun and stuff, and I miss it sometimes, but it also takes you away from a lot of things in life too. So, at that point in my life, I don't think I was ready to do it, but then the opportunities came up, and it was like, oh, here we go again. And then before you know it, I'm on the road like all the time. And it was fun though.
Yeah, the point about touring is interesting, because I had listened to, not too long ago, maybe about a year ago now, there's an interview with Dino Cazares from Fear Factory where he was talking about their whole search for a new vocalist, and how he wanted to find someone who wasn't known, but who also wasn't like some young kid who is going to get really disenchanted with touring like really fast, because it's like a whole like grueling experience. You think about it as someone who has never done it before, and it's like, oh, I get to travel around and do all this cool stuff and be in this band, but it's like a lot grittier than that,
Yeah. I kind of feel like it's even worse now. Now that there's no budgets out there for up and coming bands and stuff. I mean, it was always hard, but I can only imagine. I feel like it's harder now. I think one of the last record deals that I was a part of, the advance money was like 10 grand, right? 10 grand. Think about that. You can spend 10 grand in a phone call, almost. So, it's really tough.
Yeah, like it all sounds like fun and games until you're eating cold SpaghettiOs in the back of a van in a parking lot.
Potato chip sandwiches.
Yeah.
I've done it.
Yeah, and there's another thing that I thought of that just slipped my mind. The Brooklyn clubs, I feel like I knew all of them by name back in the day, just because of Typo songs too, because Lamore gets name dropped in Unsuccessfully Coping, and I think pretty much every other club that was in that borough gets a name drop at some point in their music.
Yeah,
it's
Brighton Beach.
Yeah. Oh yeah, take the D train to Brighton Beach on Kill You Tonight.
Right, it was the D train. See, that's what I remember it being, the D train. They change those trains all the time. I mean, it hasn't been the D train in a while, I feel like. But when he sung about it, that's when I remember that train being, D train. Yeah.
Yeah, the first time I ever visited New York, I was on the D train and listening to that song, and I was like, this is pretty cool.
I feel like they took the D train though, and they put it on the other side of town.
Yeah, because it goes up through Harlem now, I think.
Yeah, because like when he was talking about it, it was going Kings Highway, it was going to Sheepshead Bay and Brighton Beach. Yeah, and I used to live right there.
Yeah. And the point that you had about the music scene there being kind of incestuous, that's a thing that I've talked about with friends in Louisville, Kentucky, who were involved in like the punk and hardcore scene there back in like the 80s and 90s. and with friends who've been involved in, you know, the Chicago metal scene, from bands that were around back in the 80s through the bands that have been around in the last like decade or two, where uh, everyone's always just kind of passing around the same members, you know, like Chicago has like maybe like 3 or 4 metal drummers who are in like a dozen bands.
Yeah. Yeah, we definitely had that going on. Uh, you know, like when you're in a band searching for new members, um, that's like a job in itself, you know. And sometimes it's just easy to go, well, why don't we just get so and so? And it's somebody that you know for the last 20 years or whatever, 15 years. And it's just like, there's a comfort level, and there's also, we want to get going. We don't want to, you know, put the ad in the paper and wait for the next 4 months and try out people, you know. I think that's part of it too.
Yeah, and it's like you know, wanky guitarists are like a dime a dozen, and it's hard to find like a solid like drummer and bass player though.
Yeah. And when in the case of the typo negatives, uh it's hard to find people that know how to play slow.
Yeah.
As crazy as that might sound, it's actually really hard to play slow because everything you do is heard. If you play something slightly too fast or too slow, you hear it. If you make a flub, you hear it. There's videos on YouTube, you'll hear me screw up completely at the worst possible moment because it's like the slowest picking thing and I screwed up and it's like, wah, wrong, straight up wrong. That's it. There's no hiding, you know? And so, yeah, it's kind of hard to find people that can do that. And drummers, bass players, even guitar players in that style. And it's like, I feel like I grew up listening to them and touring with them and watching them. And then I was playing with them. And it was kind of like drilled into my head, I guess, how they operate. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of these bands, like I'm pretty good at understanding what it needs, what the style is, and chameleon myself into those things. Autopsy Club, you're hearing me and Abel do what we do for real. Like this, that's just what comes out of us. The Seventh Void and the Pale Horse Named Death is those guys and me understanding what they do and applying myself, chameleoning myself to do that. And I love that too. But when I pick up a guitar and start playing or noodle on a keyboard or something, what I do doesn't come out like that. That was a combination of what they do and my production, or, you know, helping them along with that.
Yeah. And I mean, I feel like with industrial stuff like Autopsy Club, I've always found like the vocal styles on that kind of stuff harder to imitate than like a more I guess sort of like melody driven kind of musical act, you know.
Yeah. You know, there's industrial acts that the vocals are super distorted and affected and stuff, and that's cool, you know. But what I get off on is understanding the melodies and the words a little bit more. So I I tend not to over affect that stuff, you know.
Yeah, I think even then it's more like a lot of industrial, the vocals feel more spoken than sung, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like it's weird. It's like industrial has a real punk element too to it, in the vocals, in a lot of elements really, but it's almost like you don't have to be perfectly in tune as long as there's an attitude in there, vocally, or anything really, musically in there. It doesn't have to be perfectly in tune. It just has to have the feeling and an attitude, and that's very much like punk to me.
Yeah, because even with like the traditional instruments that are used, you know, in industrial, you know, like a guitar or a bass or whatever, so much of it is like getting those to sound like anything but a guitar or a bass, which is has always been one of the attractions to industrial for me.
Yeah. Um, as a guitar player, you know, it's hard for me sometimes to change the guitar sound into something that is unlike a guitar. It's like a lot of bands that we know do that. And I also I don't want to copy those bands, even though their influences, like, you know, for instance, Nine Inch Nails or Ministry. Like I love those bands, you know. You know, Trent will take a guitar and plug it directly into a fuzz box with no cabinet or anything. It'll sound like buzzy mess. But it's awesome. He makes it work, you know, and it's easy to want to do that. And, you know, it's also hard because I don't want it to be like, oh, well, he's just doing a Trent Reznor on that, you know. But but you're right. Like you can make a guitar sound like anything. I think Abel has this quote. He says that anything can be a synth if you try hard enough, or
Yeah.
if you want it to be. Yeah. So you can take a guitar and plug it into a bunch of effects processing and turn it into a violin. I don't know, turn it into like a jackhammer if you wanted to.
Yeah, you know, I mean, to your point too, there was that whole period in like the mid 90s where a lot of bands actively tried to imitate Trent. And I think probably the one that always sticks out in my mind the most is Motley Crue when they did Generation Swine in like 97.
Yeah.
And they had a lot of tracks on that album where they were trying to be this kind of semi-electronic alternative rock band.
That's it.
And it sounded too much like they were trying to just like jump onto a trend for the sake of remaining relevant.
That's interesting. I have to go back and listen to that and keep that in mind when I listen, because when they came out with that record, I felt like when I listened to it at the time that I thought it was really good. Whatever single was out at the time, I felt like it sounded good, recording wise, and the singer was really giving it. I wasn't a huge Motley Crue fan. I gotta say I did like Dr. Feelgood. You know, I thought that Mick Mars' guitar sound is awesome on that. And but I wasn't really like a huge Motley fan or any of the like hair metal bands fan of that stuff. But I feel like Motley would probably be the one on top if I were, you know. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
to go back and listen to that with that in mind though.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause that one, that the whole Motley Crue thing has always kind of stuck out to me as far as hair metal, because they're basically the band that everyone else that aped them kind of defined what hair metal was. So I've always kind of like looked at them as just outside of hair metal.
Yeah, me too.
Because yeah.
They were harder. They were
Yeah.
definitely harder. Yeah, they had more attitude. Um, you know, when I think of hair metal, I guess I think of like Warrant or like Winger or like White Snake or those bands that came just before alternative music came over and demolished the whole scene, like those bands. But
Yeah.
Motley seemed to have stayed relevant through that because I felt like they were harder.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, there is good stuff on Generation Swine. It's just like I listen to it every now and then and I can kind of see where it's like, okay, I think Tommy Lee and Nikki Sixx were listening to a lot of Nine Inch Nails and we're like, let's try this on our album.
I definitely have to go and listen. Because again, like when that came out, I guess I might have listened to the record, but it wasn't the kind of thing for me. It was, oh, let's throw it on again and again and again, and you know, really, really indulge and really listen to what's going on.
The really interesting album from around that period is the self-titled one from before that, when John Corabi sang for them, and that was like a straight on alternative rock record that if they had released it under any other band name, it probably would have been more successful.
You know, maybe now that you mentioned that, maybe that's the one I'm thinking of, that not the next one for me. I just don't know the discography that well. Yeah.
Yeah, where can people find Autopsy Club?
Autopsy Club is on every streaming service you can find that you've got, Apple Music, Spotify, all that stuff. Pick one, it's on it. And Autopsy Club has a website, .com. You can find that on Facebook. You can find us on Instagram and all the social medias. There's a link tree and it's in the descriptions. You can find us on YouTube. We released an instrumental version of the song so people can use it in their backgrounds on their videos if they'd like. And you can even make your own karaoke if you want. And that could be interesting. We do have a few remixes coming out from some remix artists, and they're going to be interesting because they're styles that we don't do. There's a hardcore dance remix coming out from a producer. His name is The Buckness, and he does hard style, and it's an amazing job. There's a Seabold remix coming out, and a few others coming out. And again, they're just they're styles that we don't do. So it's interesting for us to hear what other producers turn it into. So you'll be hearing that pretty soon.
Yeah, no, thanks again for taking the time to chat tonight.
No, thanks for having me on. It was really fun.